Hi guys, That Song Review Guy here, and on today's album review I'm going to be talking about the new album from How to Dress Well called Care. The full studio album from the American singer-songwriter Tom Krell, who adopts the stage name How to Dress Well, returns 2 years after his last release. Since his debut album in 2010, Krell has become one of the professional critics' darlings. His previous 3 releases have garnered such critical acclaim that in at least one of these publications, those albums have been credited as one of the best of their respective years. His works have all followed a pretty simple template. Keep the songs simple lyrically, and yet make sure that they all have a meaningful and relatable message to them. It's this formula that has seen Krell recognised as a talent to be recognised and praised, and with this new release entitled Care, where the central themes deal with love, loneliness and nostalgia, this is Krell revisiting the same ground and once again delivering on the goods. Harnessing this style of songwriting, which wouldn't seem out of place on a typical pop song, and combining that with electronic and acoustic sounds, all the while throwing in an element of R&B on the odd occasion, Krell has definitely created some pretty evocative sounds and words that are quite gripping and sentimental, if not feeling somewhat bloated and overplayed on occasions. The album clocks in at almost an hour in length, and boy does it feel like a stretch to listen to. Usually an album that is this long has some sort of reason to be like that, and it must be engaging enough to not feel like the artist is simply spinning the wheel unnecessarily. And unfortunately for Krell, it does come off as slightly indulgent and lacks a satisfying conclusion when all is said and done. Tracks that are successful in capturing a great message and mood include the album's opener, Can't You Tell, where the lead is dripping with pure adulation and love for another person, and it basically expresses his desire to make love to this person. And I do stress the word love, not sex. Although some of the words do come off as evocative and lustful, it's played in a way that comes off rather beautifully. And although the lead is dying to make this person theirs, he's respectful enough to make sure that the second party is ready to make that connection. It's a real left hook, and it's easily the best song on the whole album. Lost Youth stroke Lost You, which is produced by Bleacher's own Jack Antonoff, sees Krell lamenting on love lost at a young age, and how a string of relationships that came afterwards has caused him to lose all confidence in himself, and a failure to build a connection with future partners through these painful experiences leads him to believe that the only thing that's going to end his pain is the sweet release itself. It's a very bleak and hyperbolic way to end the track, but the deliverance is rather earnest and heartbreaking all the same. Burning Up sees our lead once again reflecting on a former partner and how his immaturity due to his age was one of the reasons that this caused this relationship to come to an end. Soul Song comes off as a moment of self-discovery and reflection for Krell, who realises that if he's ever going to find happiness and find someone to be with, not only does he have to expect the dangers that come with falling in love with someone, but also has to learn to accept himself, his flaws, and that he's in a position where he's comfortable enough to give himself up to that person, whoever they may be. Then you get some songs which don't necessarily leave much of a lasting impact other than a saccharine and overly sweet aftertaste that comes off as rather sickly. Whilst The Ruins taps into one of Krell's most nostalgic moments, reminiscing on the first sexual encounter he had with a male who was worried about leaving to go to college, although this doesn't necessarily fall into the latter categories, I can't help but feel that it goes around the houses in order to get to the point. One of the reasons why I'm not entirely in love with Soul Song, if truth be told. Also, as the longest track at over 6.5 minutes in length, there's a fair amount of dead air to that song. And with The Ruins being at 5 minutes in length, I think it could have done with being cut down to a degree, which is a common gripe that I have with so many songs on this project. Untitled is this skin-crawling track about helping a child understand their sadness, where its presentation is almost unbearable. Made a Lifetime comes off as this fantasy about falling in love with someone who Krell met in a hallway, and its template is too repetitive, and its lyrics are effectively a bunch of sweet nothings that ultimately mean exactly that out of context. Nothing. And the worst track on this album by far is Time Was Meant to Stay. Not only does it get off to a bad start with Krell reading off a text where he claims that it contains 10 words when in actuality there are 11 words, and he actually uses the word perf. Ugh. But when the production feels incredibly thin with virtually no bass to give the song a spine, instead opting for this heavy fuzzy synth tone, bleeping sound effects, the weakest synth flute imaginable, and farting keyboard synths, that pretty much makes this song unlistenable. Then you have The Ruins, which throws everything but the kitchen sink into the blender, switching between buzzing synths, washed out, skittering drums with little focus, an electric guitar line that comes out of nowhere, a synth acoustic, warped backing vocals. There's too much and there seems to be a lack of focus. And I Was Terrible tries juggling 3 different genres at once, and whilst I think it comes the closest to doing it competently, there's still that element of a couple of musical moments that don't entirely gel. But that's not to say that all moments are bad. The funky R&B disco style of Anxious has such a joyous, danceable nature to it that it knows exactly what it's trying to be. The piano melody on They'll Take Everything You Have is incredibly divine, and when backed by the synth, bass, drum beat and the perfect vocal delivery from Krell, I have to admit, it's a real tearjerker of a track. What's Up has this rich string arrangement opening before going into a multi-keyboard arrangement, which, whilst decent, a piece of me wanted the track to be a little gutsier in the execution. And even tracks like Burning Up and Lost Youth, Lost You contains a certain gentleness to them that add to this album's endearing nature. On the whole, Krell definitely shows his knack for creating a sentimental track that contains a sweet meaning, and there's definitely a degree of earnestness and emotional resonance that gives those songs some added lift and elevates them from good to great. But a lot of the time these songs can either be padded out too long or fluffed up with additional lyrics that do have the misfortune of either making these songs feel bloated or leave me feeling as though the song's topic is just being pedalled out to make 3 or 4 more songs of the same theme, only with less of an impact as a result. Vocally, Krell's vocals are on point, and when he reaches up into his falsetto, it's quite heavenly if truth be told, and I didn't feel like he was going overboard at any point. I do think with a little more musical focus and a little less lyrical fluffiness, it would have made this album great rather than good. But I will say, for an album where the landscape of alternative R&B seems to be close to the grave, he makes a great argument for why there's still a market for the genre. Personally, this album gets a 73 out of 100, and you know what, I do recommend giving it a listen. So there you go, those were my opinions of Care by How to Dress Well. What did you guys think of the album? Did you like the album? Did you hate the album? Do you agree with my opinions? Do you disagree with them? However you feel, leave your opinions in the comment section below, and as I always say, I welcome all comments, the good, the bad and the ugly. And until next time, I'm That Song Review Guy, and take care.